You learn to embrace uncertainty and chaos. Life is inherently chaotic, and it doesn't fit into our tidy formulas. Not only does this not make you anxious, but you find chaos and uncertainty deeply exciting and stimulating. Slowly adopting this as an overall philosophy will naturally loosen the mind up and give it greater creative flow. You will naturally consider more options and possibilities.
Try to imagine the way other people see you and what other people are thinking of you. And one place where this happens, and it definitely happened to me, is when I started getting put in charge of things. I started thinking about other people's perspectives. What are they seeing? If you're in charge, then what do your subordinates see you do? What do your subordinates hear you say? What kind of representation are they receiving? And if you work for someone else, it's the same questions. What does the boss see me do? What does the boss hear me say? What kind of representation am I making of myself to my boss? And then you start thinking about, what do your friends and family think? What do they see? What do they hear? And so the question becomes, how well do you represent yourself? What shortfalls do you have? Now, when you first start looking, it's like you're looking at an overgrown lawn. There are some big, obvious problems, so you do a broad, just kind of general cut of the grass. You fix some of the big, easy problems that are obvious. And once you've done that, once you've gotten rid of some of those big, obvious problems, you notice some more detailed problems. So then you handle them. And once you've got those handled, you see even smaller and more detailed issues. So you start trying to fix them. And that's what you do with yourself. You continually detach, and then you look, and then you refine, and then you detach, and then you look, and then you refine, and then you detach, and then you look, and then you refine. That's what you do. That's how you get better. And that process doesn't stop. It can't stop, because if you stop refining, then the weeds grow back, and the next thing you know, you can't see yourself anymore. And when you can't see yourself anymore, when you stop looking at yourself, then you accept anything. And that's wrong. Don't accept the faults. Don't give yourself the benefit of the doubt. You've got to be your own harshest critic and hold the line.
I believe in my strategies, and I'm patient as like, all great stuff, especially when you're innovating, doesn't happen right away. This notion that like, oh, Gary, I tried it. I spent $500 on Facebook ads. It doesn't work. Well, what if your video sucked? What if your product and service sucks? I tend to do things that are very early. That has been my career. When I do things, I believe in them. I stick with them based on intuition. Even though for 18 months, nobody watched my wine videos at all, I knew it was right. I was right. There's been things I've done that I've jumped off of very quickly. I started a Gary V app, VChat, V-E-E, like WeChat, I thought it was funny, for my fans. Great CRM one-on-one. Didn't feel right after a week or two, spent plenty of money building it. Stopped it after, a couple months. Wine Library TV, 5 years, every day, YouTube. Decided to change it to Daily Grape. Insular app, you could buy stuff, subscription for reviews. It was a lot of fun. Only did it for 5 months, stopped it because it didn't feel right anymore. Okay. It's always hard to know when to jump off something new, but I find that people don't believe in what they're doing. They hear a guru and they do it begrudgingly because their boss wants them to, or they're like, well, Gary's right a lot, so let me do it, but they don't believe it. And so then they're looking for no's instead of yeses. Everything I do, every business development, every event I do, every time I try a new marketing tactic or sales tactic, I'm looking for the yes.
Right.
I'm looking for the yes, and if the no punches me, well then I'm like, crap, the no punched me. I believe the majority of people when they try new tactics are looking for the no, and you're gonna getting a lot of subtle no's immediately.
Right.
And so I think that's why that happens.
There was this one role that I wanted to play desperately, but I started to get offers for other movies, and there was a big Disney movie that they wanted me to do, and I don't know where I got those little balls at 16 years old to say, no, I'm gonna wait it out because I want to audition for this other film. But if there's one thing that I'm really proud of in my entire career, it's that moment at 16 to say that, and do that and have that sort of conviction of what I wanted to do. That's the one thing I'm really proud of.
If you can see it here, and you have the courage enough to speak it will happen. So I see these shots, I see these sequences, and I don't shy away from them. A lot of times people believe in certain things, but they keep to themselves. They don't put it out there. If you truly believe in it, if you become vocal with it, you are creating that law of attraction, and it will become reality.
We took a lot of pride in trailblazing and how the game was played back at that time. We would intimidate teams and we would want to dominate teams, but also too we also had the thought process that a team was never going to outwork us. We're going to be the hardest working team in the country.
You will never know the answer unless if you ask. And that's what my father always taught me. He's like, you're never going to know if you don't ask. So ask. And that's what I do. And that's kind of how I also I communicate with my team. We know we're a team, but also we know that we can talk very directly to each other because that's how we set it up from the beginning. Right. And whoever the boss is, you set the tone. This is your arena. So however you set the tone is the way things are gonna go. So I always set the tone with kindness first, and then let's get ish done, baby.
Starting with Lincoln Lawyer was a time when I said I wanted to recalibrate my relationship with my career. I remember saying that. I remember thinking I'm enjoying it. I love what it's given me. I like going to work. I like the things I've been doing. But everything I started reading, I felt like, it's another version of something I've done, or I feel like I could do it next week. And I remember going, well, wait a minute, before you get mad at thinking you could do something next week, that's a valid feeling. Don't just say no to something because you feel like you can naturally do it. But then I said, okay, fair. I'll shake with you on that, McConaughey, but let me find something that I don't know what to do with that next week or the week after. Let me find something that I really like, but I'm going, I'm not sure. That scares me, that shakes my floor. And I was fortunate enough, because that Schedule F check I got in Angels in the Outfield, to know that my rent was paid. I was fortunate enough to know my kids were gonna eat. I was just shepherding my first son into the world. So I had that to take care of my time. And I said, it's a great time to go into the shadows and be a father and sit back and see if something turns you on from the inside or if something finds you, if you're the target that can draw the air. But we're okay. Rent's paid, kids are gonna eat, we can take some time off. I in no way was thinking about I'm done, but I didn't know how long the dry spell was gonna go. So I said no to some of the things that were similar to what I had been doing before. And it took a while. I had to sit down with my agent and say, hey, I'm really gonna do this and I need your help with my commitment to this, because after 8 months, if the same thing comes in with a big $10 million paycheck, it starts to read better and funnier. I promise you, the same words. All of a sudden, I think this thing's great. I think I can find an angle. No, I can make it a different experience for me. So I said, I'm gonna need your help bunkering down here and saying no to some things. And so I'm gonna need you to be a gatekeeper, one, to keep them from getting to me, two, but let's be real clear, I'm looking for some different things to do. He handled that. My wife, we said, we don't know how long it's gonna be dry. Then after they quit sending those, then it did get dry. Then nothing came for about a year. Wow. There was nothing. And I didn't have any sleepless nights or, oh my gosh. I was like, no, I'll find something, I'll write. I was writing a lot. I was turning myself on creatively. And as I said, I had my first son to shepherd into the world. And then the funny thing happened, the beautiful thing happened, that somehow the target drew the arrow. And I think my opinion is I became a new good idea by removing myself. I became, William Friedkin calls for the first time, Steven Soderbergh calls for the first time. Somehow in that 2 years, I became a fresh new idea that I don't think I was 2-3 years prior. How that works, I'm not sure, because I didn't send a memo out. But it did happen.
Well, the whole thing about the writer who sees the job as a burden and something that they struggle along, it makes me think there was an album by a rock artist named Todd Rundgren. It was called The Ever Popular Tortured Artist Effect. And I sometimes think that writers draw this cloak of the tortured artist around them because A, you can get free drinks, and B, chicks love it. You know, they love that tortured thing going on. But I've always thought that it was a terrific job, and I've always felt very, very fortunate, blessed really, to be able to do it. Because I do it for free if I couldn't do it for money, but I love doing it for money. That sounds kind of nasty, doesn't it? I love doing it for money.
I am a cinemaniac, and I'm scared to death of the dark, except when in a motion picture theater. I love to see images, because I love images that tell stories. Before I ever knew how to read, I used to look at the Sunday funnies and still understand everything the storyteller wanted me to. And that's what I love to do more than anything else. I love to make pictures so I can look at them, so you could look at them, and so I can watch you looking at them, which is really, for me, the best part. If I had to single out one area to which I have an utter devotion, it would be with my preoccupation with the idea and the fight to still believe in the idea when so many others around you just don't get it, and the challenge of staying interested in one single idea for sometimes years, and the struggle not to contaminate that idea after months and years of obsessing over it. When I was in my early teens, I stayed up all night writing a screenplay and felt something to this day I swear I cannot get enough of. It was as close to the feeling of flying as I have ever had. You know what I mean when you're trying to get the words on paper and you're 3 thoughts ahead of yourself, and it's a race to get it all down before it goes back to wherever that stuff originally comes from. And it was called inspiration. And I actually made a movie from that script I wrote all night, and it was called Firelight. And it was truly an awful movie. But the process was what it was all about. The experience of that obsessive focus, of having an idea and actually being able to photograph it. That's been the magic potion for me ever since.
Well, I think impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. When someone tells me it's impossible, I always just look at them. Anybody around me knows that they can't do that. So that's part of it. But if they didn't know me, it's your opinion. And they'll say, no, science shows. And I say, yeah, and how many times has science showed something's impossible? Now science shows it's possible. Things are impossible until somebody does it. And so I find that, most of your business people, you look at businesses and what does it take to make a business grow? It's not impossible to make a business grow. A business has been shrinking for a long time, or it's been stuck. The real problem is always, the chokehold is always the psychology and the skills of the leader, always. And 80% of that is psychology and 20% is the mechanics. Like if you don't know how to read your financials and you're trying to fly the plane of your company, I mean, come on, if all you do is go down and you look at profit and loss and you see what it is and you have a beer, either way, you either celebrate or you get depressed, something, you're gonna be in trouble, right? But if you have the skill sets, that's one thing, but you can get any skill set if you have the psychology. And anytime a business is not growing, it is not because it's impossible. It's because they aren't innovating, and they're not innovating because they're believing it's impossible. I mean, if we all know what does it take to transform, and obviously help people, it takes 3 things to create a breakthrough in anything, in your personal life, in your business, anywhere. You need a strategy. But that's not the first place you should look, and it's the first place all of us look. Me too. It's our inherent thing. You want to lose weight? Well, how do I do it? I want to grow my business. How do I do it? It's instinctive. We've been trained to think that way. But the problem is the how-to is usually not that complex. I mean, come on. 70% of America is what, 75% of America now is overweight? Is that because it's so complex how to be fit and strong, right? You know, only the 1% know the answers. They hide it from you. You have to work your ass off to not hear what it takes, right? And so, you know, I remember I went to a TED Med Center, and I watched about 12 doctors, one after another, get up and do these stories about how we could just get patients to take their medications and try to figure out the whole thing. And I was just looking and going, you're all talking about strategy and you've forgotten psychology. Because strategy is wonderful. I'm a strategist. I spent my whole life figuring out strategies. As we both know, a strategy could save you a decade, right? In business, strategy could save you, you know, it could make the difference between success and failure. But most people have strategies available, or they could get them, or you could create them. But the problem is you got a story. And your story is why it isn't working. And the story is, I've tried what? What? Everything. If you tried everything, you'd be fit, right? If you tried everything, you'd be profitable. If you tried everything, you'd be there. But people say it, you know, I'm big boned. That's what I used to say. I'm still big boned, but I'm 38 pounds lighter than I was 25 years ago, and I've never gained it back, right? When I was big boned, that was my story. All the good ones are gone. That's why I'm not in a relationship. Or they're gay and I'm not, or I'm gay and they are, or whatever the story is. There's always a story. And what I tell people is, you know, if you can just divorce the story of your limitation and marry the truth of your unlimited capacity, then the whole game changes.
Use active imagination is deceptively simple. Often what separates creative from conventional thinkers is that they simply search wider. They use their minds to generate possibilities that others don't think of, and then they work to verify what they came up with. We saw a classic example of this with Pasteur. Another great example is with Henry Ford. Early on in his career, in the earliest years of what would later become the Ford Motor Company, Ford was anxious to speed up the production of cars. He saw the automobile as the ultimate consumer product, but in order for it to become that, he had to greatly increase the production rate in his factory. So he spent a couple days looking at his employees on the factory floor and trying to imagine how he could get them to move faster from car to car. Suddenly one day he imagined something completely different. He imagined the men standing still and the cars coming to them. He didn't know what that really meant, but he decided to try it out, and lo and behold, it increased productivity by such an incredible exponential rate that it could now become the consumer product that he had envisioned. Things like antibodies or assembly lines, they seem so obvious to us now, but they are never obvious in the present, and they involve an incredible leap of what I call active imagination. The difference between regular and active imagination is that the latter is used consciously to reach very, very practical results. It's not imagination for coming up with wild things. It's imagination used for very practical results. Think of active imagination as a kind of creative muscle that you're developing. First, within the loose constraints of what you're working on, you open your mind up you give it complete free rein. You entertain almost every possibility that you could imagine or visualize. You engage in what Charles Darwin calls fool's experiments. This is the fun, play part of serious play. You use notebooks, sketches, diagrams, models, prototypes to help externalize the products of your imagination. Once you have gone through this, you now enter the second serious part of the process. First, you choose one or few of the more promising possibilities that were generated by your imagination, and now you actively work to test, verify, or confirm it. This might entail launching a beta version on the public. Once you have feedback, you now go back into the first part of the process in a shortened form, using your imagination to perhaps take what you have into an even better and higher form, circling constantly through this process in shorter and shorter cycles until you've got something that's both incredibly imaginative and incredibly realistic and practical. By developing this, by going through this over and over and over again, you will develop your imagination into an incredibly powerful creative muscle.
I don't know, there's a lot of negativity to some degree, a lot of grind. It just kind of feels like the grind a little bit. So I just kind of felt like it wasn't a space that I wanted to be in as much anymore. Like I want to be in a happy space where I'm just doing things that bring me joy. And it wasn't doing that as much, or I was noticing it. I was missing that or wanting it more. I think that's really what it comes from, is growing as a person and realizing, I think everybody's afraid to take chances and do something new in their life because they're identified a certain way, or they'll be judged if they don't do it, or judged if they do something different. And who are they now? And are they crazy? And what are they thinking? And, it's just life. Just do things that make you happy.
I mean, I had to. I wanted to be open about it, as I'd been from the very beginning. It was, from an athlete's perspective, it was one of the toughest things that I had to go through. And I feel like sharing that feeling that I had and the vulnerability that I had to carry myself with. And for someone that's so strong and like mentally tough and have always, at 6'2", passionate about what she does, it felt really small. For one of the first few times in my life where I didn't want to write. I didn't want to continue writing the book. It took a long time to put those words onto paper. And I felt that was important. It's part of my journey. It's part of the reason why my book is called Unstoppable, because I've had this mentality from a very young age that no matter what is thrown at you, there's going to be roadblocks and you have to overcome them, and you can.
Whether it's personal or people around me, when you see people that are positive, that look at something good and something bad that took place, they move along in life faster, they're better, and people want to be around these people. Too often people gossip. Then one gossip person wants to be around the other person that gossips. But they don't realize when you gossip, you're saying something you heard about somebody else. You're telling everybody, what if part of it was wrong? You're going to go out and tell every person you told this, oh, I'm sorry it was wrong. Tell everybody you told. It's not going to happen. So it's things you learn about. Don't gossip. Don't belittle people if you don't have to. God, please don't. Try and look at the positive angle. What good could come out of something? And that positiveness is going to make you live longer, happier, and wake up in the morning happy, not, oh my God, I gotta go to work, I can't wait till I get home, I want to retire, because people were not positive, they were not happy. And what happens when they retire? They hate their job, they retire, 3 or 4 years later they're dead because they have nothing to do. That positive attitude, be around positive people, encourage positiveness. If you find yourself walking around just complaining all the time around people that complain a lot, man, move or just try and do something different, change your life. Being positive and a positive attitude is find something positive and something bad. Makes you look for solutions. When I was down and out, oh, pop bottles, let's get the pop bottles, cash them in.
Beating the self-esteem drum for 50 years. Oh no, you're okay, you should feel good about yourself. Like, you're fine the way you are. It's like you think, well, that's a calming message for people. It's like, no, it's not. It's not at all. And I watch my audiences, it's like, it's full of people in the audience who think, I'm suffering a lot more than I think is tenable. A whole bunch of it's my fault. My life is not in the order it should be. I know I'm doing 50 things wrong. It's like, what the hell's wrong with me? What's wrong with the people around me? This is really serious. And some, well-meaning person comes up and says, you're okay just the way you are. It's like, no one wants that message. It's like, no, I'm not okay the way I am. I'm not okay at all the way I am. I know that. And so, when I'm speaking when I'm speaking now, I say to people, well, you're nowhere near what you could be. That's the positive message. It's like, yeah, you're a mess, but you don't have to stay that way. If you're a mess, you know it, obviously. You're suffering away like so much you can barely tolerate it. It's like, that's okay. You can do something about it. And that's the thing that turns the lights on. It's like, you could do something about it. It's like,
99% of people that say stuff like that are not willing to do what it takes to make their dreams come true. The Marines have a saying, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And that's just real. At the center of bringing any dream into fruition is self-discipline. Something as simple as food and eating, it's not about your body as much as it is about your mind. It's getting command of your mind to be able to choose actions that are in your own best interest. Every day, we are choosing shit that's not in our own best interest, right? So if the world is attacking you and the world wants to fight you and the world's trying to hold you down, so you're gonna kick yourself in the balls? So you're gonna stop yourself from getting what you dream. Self-discipline is the center of all material success. You cannot win the war against the world if you can't win the war against your own mind.
The biggest struggle, man, was just getting around other people that would say I could do it. I mean, that's the biggest struggle. Just you get around one guy says, yeah, you can do it. And then you talk to him tomorrow and he's like, no, dude, this is freaking, you can't do this. You know, there's so few people telling you to do it. You know what there is a lot of? Save your money, protect yourself, conserve, don't spend, don't take risk. Taking risk is the new way to be risk adverse. So the biggest struggle for me was my family, man. The people closest to me was the biggest struggle. Every time I went out to do another deal, everybody told me, you don't need to do that, man. The only person that was encouraging me was my twin brother, because I would see how he was doing it. Dude, he was making his swings. And so every time I'd get around other people, so I'll tell you a little trick I did. On weekends, I would always go see homes I couldn't afford. That has always inspired me. I would go drive neighborhoods. Literally, I've done this my entire life until I finally got to the point where they wouldn't even let me in the neighborhood. There's neighborhoods in Miami, dude, you can't even go see. They won't even let you in the gates. Most of them you can get in if you know some of my tricks. So the point that Shovita's writing on the board right now is you got fuel in your tank. It wants to be accelerated on, and then you got somebody in the back seat saying, hey, be careful. Nobody likes a backseat driver, okay? So they're sitting there, they're putting mental pressure on the brakes when you're trying to accelerate.
Who are you competing with? And whatever you do, you have to ask yourself, what's your edge? Right? What is the one thing that gives you a competitive edge? If you don't have an answer, you can't start that company. You're gonna lose, right? I said it before, if you're trying to compete with me, you better know a whole lot more than I do about whatever business we're in, because otherwise, I'm gonna kick your ass, right? So you have to ask yourself, what is your competitive advantage? And with that competitive advantage, what's the best way for me to get customers who are willing to write me a check? One of my skill sets has always been, I've been able to walk into any type of business and understand their company, understand how they make money, understand how they compete. So I can walk into a shoe store, I can walk into a hospital or whatever and say, all right, here's my technology, here's how it gives you an advantage. And I try to do the same thing. On Shark Tank, you hear us say it all the time. What is your competitive advantage? Just saying it's my passion. Do you ever walk into 7-Eleven and say, wow, I'm shopping here at 7-Eleven because they're really passionate? No, right? And when you go and you think about your own buying decisions. What makes you decide to buy? Now you might want to support veteran-owned businesses. When it's a toss-up, yes, right? But at some point you have to grow beyond the community and you have to be able to say, you can walk into any situation and know without any doubt in your mind, this is why you are the best product or service and you are the best company to provide that product or service. Period, end of story. If you can't do that, you have to ask yourself, who is doing it? What are they doing that gives them that edge? What allows them to compete or help their customers better than you can? Right, because that's what it's all about. We all as consumers make buying decisions. And the people who are buying our stuff, product or service, use the same thought process for those buying decisions. So always put yourself in your potential customer's shoes. What is it that I have that makes it a no-brainer for them to buy from me? If it's, I'm nice, I'm passionate, you're in trouble, right? There's gotta be something, because even if you can get some customers, how are you gonna grow it? How are you gonna sustain it? And what's gonna keep the next person from coming in and doing the same thing? Because look, with success comes additional challenges. The more you succeed, the more people say, damn, okay, that's an opportunity. I think I can do that better. And so success isn't, look where I'm at. Success is go, 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 right? I mean, people say, wow, you've done this. I'm still going, right? To me, business is the ultimate sport. And there's nobody on the face of the earth that's more competitive than I am. I've said that to Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, you name it, right? Any athlete, any business person. It is the ultimate sport, and we're competing all the time. What is it that gives you an edge that allows you to compete? How do you sustain that? And how do you find more people that say yes to buying that? That is going to be the key to your business. And how do you sell it?
If it were easy to get what you wanted in life, Google would have already figured out an app. You would just type in, okay, I'm a student and I want to go from being a student to being successful. And Google would tell you, go to college, then you get your master's, then you land this killer job, and then you put in a bunch of FaceTime while you're checking Facebook. Then you get promoted to manager, and then you realize managing people kind of stinks, and then you keep climbing the corporate ladder. And then you start to wonder, well, how did I end up here? And then you wonder, well, is this what success looks like? You're like, no, I'm going to go to Jay Hilburn. That's what success looks like. So keep this in mind. If there's something that you want, like 7 people, or a trip to Africa, or you're going to make it to Mexico in the pink shirt, I'm looking at you again, sorry. I'm watching you. And rooting for you. Keep in mind this. Here you are. This is what you want. I spend a lot of time on lacrosse fields, although they don't really look like this. You tend to think that what you want, you just march right towards it. But if in sports you march right towards the goal, what happens? The defenders come in. And what the defenders are is it's your brain saying, ain't gonna happen. So the second you start moving toward that thing you want, be ready. You're gonna tell yourself you don't feel like it. You're gonna have to force yourself. It's happening. There's no way to get around it. So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna basically get bounced around a lot. All over the place. And there are gonna be a lot of times that you feel like this was a really dumb idea to start this business because it's gonna get hard. And I wanna remind you about something. Unlike a sports field where there's an in and out of bounds, the great thing about life is there actually aren't any. And it's usually in those moments where you feel like you can't do it, that you're closer than ever to having everything that you wanted. And I wanted to show you this so that you keep it in mind, because I think a lot of times when you look back, it's the darkest moments where you realize, holy cow, that's what projected me forward.
Sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time, 7 days a week, no matter what.
Really?
Sleep is so valuable, it's so important,
Yeah, I
it's so
believe that.
underrated. I used to think that, here's what I'm a fighter jet. I would literally walk around the house, honey, I'm a fighter jet. Fighter jet, doesn't even come down to get refueled. They're up there getting refueled, right?
Right.
We've all seen the YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Well, the fighter jet, if they leave those afterburners on too long, they just fall out of the sky, which no one had told me.
Right.
Until I fell out of the sky. I was having essential tremors and anxiety attacks and not realizing it. And as I got better at sleep, those just went away, because one discipline leads to another and to another. How you do anything is how you do everything,
yeah.
right? And so that one thing that he taught me, or I learned through him, and we'd be in Vegas, we'd run a mastermind together, because now we run a mastermind together. And at 8 o'clock, and he's gone. Buddy, where are you going? I'm like,
sleep.
Yeah.
I'm there by 9 or whatever, right? Or,
Yeah, exactly. And he powers off 30 minutes, all his electronics before. So now I do the same thing. I power off. I don't go to bed and then do this.
yeah.
I'm powered off 30 minutes before, and my mind stops racing, and the left and right side start reconciling of the information I took in throughout the day versus the information I keep consuming, taking it, right? Until I fall asleep, and then Lord knows what happens in my brain.
Right. What time do you go to bed and wake up?
10:30. 10:30,
wow.
I'm in bed, wake up at 5:30.
Wow.
And it's been like
No matter
that
what, even if you're in Vegas or traveling around the world or whatever.
Yeah, I'll adjust to that time zone real quickly, and 10:30 I'm in bed, 5:30 a.m. I wake up, and I go right through my rituals.
How did you stay motivated all the time? People ask me that all the time, and the answer is I didn't, and neither did you to become successful. The separator in life is really important. People think the most inspired, motivated person wins. Nah, not really. It's the person who can work on the days they're not inspired and motivated. It's what do you do when you're not feeling great? What do you do when it's not your best day? How do you do that? Carries you through is rituals and habits. So when you're fatigued, when you're tired, when you're under pressure, you react reflexively. And so successful people rely on habits and rituals, not just their inspiration and motivation level. Of course, we're both professionals at being motivated and inspired, but that's not every day, every minute. And so what do? I work on the days because my habits and rituals carry me through. And so for me, here's how I look at my life and my day. If I can control the first 30 minutes of my day, and the last 30 minutes of my day, I have a whole lot better chance of the middle of my day being controlled. And so I'm a freak about the first 30 minutes of every day. It's really about the first 45 minutes, and I'm obsessive about the last 45 minutes of every single day. That gives me some illusion in my mind and measure of control. The other thing it does, it delivers to me habits and rituals that serve me, that I do every day that are consistent. It gives me comfort in stormy times. That ocean out there is raging at the top right now, right? The waves are crashing. At the bottom of that ocean, it's completely calm. At the bottom of that ocean is the habitual part of the water, right? It's the part of the water that stays the most consistent. That's why it's so calm, okay? So when you see someone out of control, their emotions are up and down all the time. This is someone who is without rituals and habits. Successful people have those, and so they do. And so it keeps me calm, it keeps me comfortable.
Because I believe ambition is not a dirty word. It's just believing in yourself and your abilities. Imagine this. What would happen if we were all brave enough to believe in our own ability, to be a little bit more ambitious? I think the world would change.
And I had about a year and a half where I would audition, and I would get 1 callback, 2 callbacks, 3 callbacks, and I never got the part. And I remember feeling like I'm too tight, you know what I mean? I think maybe I'm studying too much. I remember talking to myself, and maybe I'm studying too much about the import of the line and everything. And you know what? I think I need to go back to doing what I did when I first started, which is I was just a guy and I improvised. So I had a film that I was cast for, and I was playing this on-the-border Mexican drug lord. And I told myself, I said, I'm not going to look at the sides. I'm not even going to read the script. It's an on-the-border Mexican drug lord. I hear the synopsis. If I know my man, then I'll show up and just, obviously, I'll read it right before I go on. And if I know my man, that'll be like, well, that's exactly what he'd say. Foolish. I go to set that morning. All right, all I got to do is have a glance at it, and it'll be like, yep, I know how to do it. Well, I look at it right before we're about to say action, and it was a 1.5-page monologue in Spanish. Oh, and I remember I felt this drip of sweat come up on the back of my head and go down, and I for whatever reason, I looked over and I said, can you give me about 12 minutes? Why I said 12 minutes, I don't know. I figured it was like not long enough to be inconsiderate, but long enough to maybe get a little bit of that stuff. Anyway, I think I was horrible in it. I stammered through some Spanish and tried to look at lines. So then I was like, okay, that's not the way to go. There's a blend here of having to do your due diligence, do your studying, but then being able to go there on the day and relax and throw it all away.
The best description of writing a novel that I ever heard was actually in Thomas Williams's book, The Hair of Harold Drew, which is about a novelist trying to write a novel, and it just covers like 1 or 2 days in this process, and a lot of things happen to him. It's a fabulous book. But he says that writing a novel is like building a little campfire on an empty, dark plain, and one by one, these characters come out of the dark, and each one has a little pile of wood, and they put it on the fire, and if you're very lucky, before the fire goes out, it's this big bonfire, and all the characters stand around it and warm themselves. And that's the way it's always been for me. I have a good friend over in Vermont, John Irving, and John says that he always begins a novel by writing the last line. And to me, that's like eating your dessert before you eat the meal. And everybody works a different way, and God bless John, and he's done some wonderful work in his lifetime, and he'll probably do some more, but I could never write a book that way. The way that I think of it, is that fire. I love that particular image, but I've also always thought of it in terms of there's a little thread, a little red thread that goes into a hole in the baseboard, and you just start to pull it out, and you see what's on the other end of it, and sooner or later you get there. For me, the fun of writing novels isn't in the finished product. which I don't care about that much. There's a guy who was looking at my shelf over there. All the books are on the shelf, and to me, those are like dead skin. The things that are done, but I love the process.
I get it back by remembering that you might die tomorrow.
That's true.
So I'm inspired by practicality and reality and the truth, which is, it is ridiculously impossible to become a human being. I am one. I have other good things going for me as a human being, and I'm just grateful. You're dwelling and looking at what you don't have versus looking at what you have. If you actually looked at what you had, your health, living in America, who the heck knows what would be on your list? If you actually spent all your time looking at that versus, I don't have $1 million, I'm not famous, I don't have this. If you spent all your time on what you have versus what you don't have, you would be the happiest girl on earth.
You got to make a commitment to service. You got to make a commitment to hey, I have a target. I know that when we don't achieve targets here in my office, the first thing I ask, regardless, the internet department, if it's my accounting department on collections, or it's my sales department, I'm going to ask a question. What is the target? No target results in no sales. So if you're in parts, if you're in service, look, have a target. Measure that target hourly. If you really want to get results, measure your target every hour to see what did we get in the last 60 minutes. I promise you, do those two simple things. Don't even learn anything about how to sell anybody anything. Have a target, measure it every hour, and I guarantee your sales will come up.
Why do you prioritize sleep so highly? Just curious of what makes you so committed to that and the science behind it. Thank you for all you do. I find that I'm slower when I'm fatigued. So I find myself drifting. I have more symptoms of what we'll call ADD, so that my attention just drifts. And then I find I'll read a sentence or whatever and be like, God, I have to reread the sentence like 10 times. So that was just going, whoa. I'm not as efficient as I could be. And then the other is I find it a unique form of misery. There is an additional ring of hell that is saved just for people who are fatigued. I hate it so much. So it's misery, and I don't understand people that live a life that is miserable. I just don't get it. And then on top of that, I think you actually accomplish less if you're fatigued. So you're putting more hours, but you're actually getting less done per hour. So if being fatigued puts you at 0.6 of what your output could be, and then being just incredibly well rested, prioritizing that puts you at, it's, I guess mathematically I should be saying just 1, then you have to make up 40% of the number of hours in waking up early just to break even, and then you put misery on top of that. So that's my N of 1 experience, is that I am so deadly efficient when I'm rested that I just get more done. So comparing those two side by side, I actually accomplish more.